ततो जयमुदीरयेत् नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवते उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 26, Text 5. गुणैर्विचित्रः सृजतीं स्वरूपः प्रकृतिं प्रजाः विलोक्य मुमुहे सद्या स इह ज्ञानगूहया. विचित्राः सृजतीं स्वरूपा प्रकृतिं प्रजाः विलोक्य मुमुहे सद्याः स इह ज्ञानगूहया. गुणैर्विचित्राः सृजतीं स्वरूपा प्रकृतिं प्रजाः विलोक्य मुमुहे सद्याः स इह ज्ञानगूहया. Synonyms: Gunaihi, by the threefold modes. Vichitraha, variegated. Srijatim, creating. Sarupaha, with forms. Prakritim, material nature. Prajaha, living entities. Vilokya, having seen. Mumuhe, was illusioned. Sadhyaha, at once. Saha, the living entity. Iha, in this world. Jnana Guhaya, by the knowledge of covering feature. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Divided into varieties by her threefold modes, material nature creates the forms of the living entities, and the living entities seeing these are illusioned by the knowledge covering feature of the illusory energy. Purport: material energy has the power to cover knowledge, but this covering cannot be applied to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is applicable only to the prajaha, or those who are born with material bodies, the conditioned souls. The different kinds of living entities vary according to the modes of material nature, as explained in Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic literature. In Bhagavad Gita 7.12, it is very nicely explained that although the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance are born of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is not subject to them. In other words, the energy emanating from the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot act on him. It acts on the conditioned souls who are covered by the material energy. The Lord is the father of all living entities because he impregnates material energy with the conditioned souls. Therefore, the conditioned souls get bodies created by the material energy, whereas the father of the living entities is aloof from three modes. It is stated in previous verse that the material energy was accepted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in order that he might exhibit pastimes for the living entities who wanted to enjoy and lord it over the material energy. This world was created through the material energy of the Lord for the so-called enjoyment of such living entities. Why this material world was created for the sufferings of the conditioned souls is a very intricate question. There is a hint in the previous verse in the word Leelaya, which means for the pastimes of the Lord. The Lord wants to rectify the enjoying temperament of the conditioned souls. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita that no one is the enjoyer but the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This material energy is therefore created for anyone who pretends to enjoy. An example can be cited here that there is no necessity for the government's creation of the separate police department. But because it is a fact that some of the citizens will not accept the state laws, a department to deal with criminals is necessary. There is no necessity, but at the same time, there is a necessity. Similarly, there was no necessity to create this material world for the sufferings of the conditioned souls, but at the same time, there are certain living entities known as Nitya Baddha who are eternally conditioned. We say that they have been conditioned from time immemorial because no one can trace out when the living entity, the part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, became rebellious against the supremacy of the Lord. It is a fact that there are two classes of men: those who are obedient to the laws of the Supreme Lord and those who are atheists or agnostics, who do not accept the existence of the Lord and who want to create their own laws. They want to establish that everyone can create his own laws, they want to establish that everyone can create his own laws on his own religious path without tracing out the beginning of the existence of two classes. We can take it for granted that some of the living entities revolted against the laws of the Lord. Such entities are called conditioned souls, for they are conditioned by the three modes of material nature. Therefore, the words Gunair Vichitraha are used here. In this material world, there are 8,400,000 species of life. As spirit souls, they are all transcendental to the material world. Why then do they exhibit themselves in different stages of life? The answer is given here. They are under the spell of three modes of material nature. Because they were created by the material energy, their bodies are made of the material elements. Covered by the material body, the spiritual identity is lost, and therefore the word mumuhe is used here, indicating that they have forgotten their own spiritual identity. This forgetfulness of spiritual identity is present in the jivas, or souls who are conditioned, being subject to be covered by the energy of material nature. Jnana guhaya is another word used. Guha means covering. Because the knowledge of the minute conditioned souls is covered, they are exhibited in so many species of life. It is said in Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 7th chapter, the living entities are illusioned by the material energy. In the Vedas also it is stated that the eternal living entities are covered by different modes, and that they're called tricolored, red, white, and blue living entities. Red is the representation of the mode of passion, white is the representation of the mode of goodness, and blue is the representation of the mode of ignorance. These modes of material nature belong to the material energy, and therefore the living entities under these different modes of material nature have different kinds of material bodies. Because they are forgetful of their spiritual identities, they think the material bodies to be themselves. To the conditioned soul, me means the material body. This is called moha, or bewilderment. It is repeatedly said in Katha Upanishad that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is never affected by the influence of the material nature. It is rather the conditioned souls, or the minute, infinitesimal parts and parcels of the Supreme, who are affected by the influence of material nature, and who appears in different bodies under the material modes. ओम ज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरौ श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं श्रीकृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगण ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधो जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरंगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So, Canto 3, Chapter 26. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur defines this chapter, or names this chapter as the fifth description of the universal form of the Lord. So we have seen the descriptions of the universal form of the Lord in this Srimad Bhagavatam within the second canto in detail and third canto. We have seen already 4 times. This is the fifth description of the universal form of the Lord, the fifth chapter. So Srila Prabhupada titles this chapter as what is the title? Yeah, Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. Okay. In the previous chapter, chapter 25, Mother Devahuti asked Kapila Dev about, yeah, let me share that. Can I share? Okay. Devati has in chapter in the previous chapter, text 28, she asks a question of Devatir Vacha Kachit Tvai Uchita Bhakti Kidrish Mama Gochara Yaya Padamti Nirvanam Anjas Anja Sa Anvasanvaham. So she's asking, oh my Lord, yeah, she's asking on hearing, okay, what kind of devotional service? Uchita Bhakti. She's asking, what is a devotional service? Is worth developing and practicing to help me easily and immediately attain the service of your lotus feet. So she asked about the Uchita Bhakti, right, in chapter in text 28, and in text 29, she asks about give me the process, like what is this yoga, and I need to know about it. So basically, she's asking about the yoga and jnana. So uh, Kapila Dev, in chapter 25, he talked about bhakti. He ends. Uh, I don't think I'm sharing. Let me share the screen so you'll see what I'm sharing. So this is chapter 25 and text 28 and 29, 30. So these are the three verses Mother Dehuti asked with Kapil Dev. In 28, she asks about Uchita Bhakti. Okay, what is the kind of devotional service is worth developing and practicing? And 29, she asks them about the mystic yoga system, as you have explained. So she's talking, she wants to know about the Jnana or the yoga system, Ashtanga yoga system. And also, she's trying to understand the knowledge of this yoga system. So basically, the three points are covered here. So first thing is Jnana. So she's asking about Jnana. She's asking about the first thing is she asked about Bhakti. She asked about the yoga, which is Ashtanga yoga, and then she's asking about the Jnana. So she asked three questions, and now Lord, in this same chapter, chapter 25, at the end, he beautifully quotes different verses, explaining his opulences and explaining the what kind of a devotee you have to associate, how to become a bhakta, and how to what are the qualities of the devotees. Everything is given in this chapter at the almost at the end of this 25th chapter. So the one verse, yeah, so he talks about his opulences also. His so madbhayad vati vato yam suryastapati madbhayat Varshat Indro Dahati Agnir Mrityuscharati Madbhayat. So he talks about his opulence here. Like, it is because of my supremacy that wind blows out of fear of me, the sun shines out of fear of me, and the clouds, Indra sends four showers out of fear of me, fire burns out of fear of me, and death goes about talking it's tall out of fear of me. So he's telling his opulences, and he's telling that you don't have to depend upon anything else, any other process. The only process is come back to me, that is bhakti. So that he explains in the chapter 25. Next chapter, so the three things, right? Bhakti, Jnana, and yoga system. And here, the Lord, in this chapter, Lord is talking about the Jnana. So he gives the knowledge of the creation, knowledge of the subtle elements, how the creation has happened, how the cosmic manifestations happened. So we have seen these same descriptions four times before. That's why Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur is defining or titling this chapter as the fifth description of the universal form of the Lord. So that is the basically we'll get back to the same creation mode, like how the creation happened, why the creation happened, and what are the things that are happened. We'll see all these 72 verses in this chapter. Everything is defined in this chapter. Now, before we go there, let's start and see the previous verses in this chapter. So he talks about whenever yeah, check text one. If you go, he's giving the prayojana of following this or understanding this creation, right? What is the prayojana? He's saying that. So yad viditva vimuchyeta. So by um, now I shall describe unto you the different categories of absolute truth, knowing which any person can be released. Viditva, all right? Viditva is knowing. Vimuchyate, one can be released from the influence of the modes of material nature. So this is the main purpose of learning about the creation. So a living entity is being controlled by the modes of material nature in this material world. So to get out of this condition, the living entity has to learn about or know about the process or know about how the creation has happened and what are the elements and how this living entity is not that elements. He's been attacked or he's been covered by this material modes. That's why he's acting in a different way, but it's not his real nature. So what is the real nature of a living entity? The real nature of the living entity is the real definition of the real nature of the living entity is the servant of the Supreme Personality of Lord, Godhead, and it's the nature is to serve the Lord, to serve the Supreme Being. Okay. So that understanding will come by learning how this creation has happened. So that's why this topic of creation has been discussed multiple times in Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, so now if we go to the fourth verse, the verse one before us, Lord is talking about the Maya, right? He says that Shayesha Prakritim Sukshmam Dhaivim Gunamayim Vibhuhu Edrichaye Vopakatam Abhyapadyata Leelaya. So there are two words. Edricha is with his desire. Okay, no one is controlling, or no one is asking Lord, or no one is questioning Lord about the creation. He is doing with his wish, Yadrichaya, of his own will. There is no one who is commanding the Lord to do something. He's doing it with his own word and with his own will. And the other one is, why is he doing it? Is because of Leelaya. Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport, we'll go back to that again. But with his, as a pastime, just as a pastime, he's doing it. So the next verse, today's verse, if we go, next verse is Gunair Vichitra Srijatim Sarupa Prakritim Prajaha Vilokya Mumuhe Sadya Saiha Jnana Guhaya. So these living entities are created into multiple shapes, multiple forms, right? Divided into varieties by her threefold modes. So who is she? She is the Prakriti. Prakriti is the Lord's energy, right? Vichitra Sarupa Prakritim Prajaha. So Prajaha are living entities are released, and they take different forms, and they see the different forms, and they get illusioned. They're not in their own. So they, what are they? Jnana Guhaya. Their knowledge is covered. A living entity by itself is eternal, right? When the living entity is covered by these material modes, the knowledge has been covered. Basically, the knowledge or the Satchit Ananda potency will get reduced. So basically, when the living entity is supposed to coexist with the Lord, but because of that little independence that living entity gets, living entity desires to enjoy away from the Lord, right? So when the living entity desires to enjoy away from the Lord, and Lord fulfills the desire of that living entity, that little independence that living entity got, and asks his potency, that is Mahamaya. In the previous, as we have seen in the previous verse, Mahamaya. Mahamaya is the energy, is subservient of the Lord himself. So Mahamaya works or performs actions according to the will of the Lord. She doesn't whimsically do anything she wants to do. She completely follows the instructions of the Lord and creates this material world. Okay, so, and the Lord impregnates this material world with the living entities, and the material, these living entities in there are subjected to these material modes of nature. Okay, so that is how that is how it works. Then now the question is, so how this Mahamaya or the Prakriti or the servant of the Lord creates this material world? How, like, what is the, basically she divides herself into three potencies. The first potency is Pradhan, right? We have studied about Pradhan in the second canto, fifth chapter and sixth chapter, and third canto, fifth chapter and sixth chapter. So we have learned about it. So Pradhan, she divides herself into three parts, three potencies: Pradhan, Vidya, and Avidya. Okay. So Pradhan is the basically it offers all possible varieties, all possible material that is required for this material world. Okay, so that is Pradhan. And that is basically she's presenting all the vastu, all the elements, like Panchabhuta and everything required for this creation of this material world. And avidya potency makes sure that living entity enjoys without guilt. Okay, making him explore and experience the material creation. So what is this avidya potency? Is basically um, our living entity desired to have to enjoy a little bit. Okay, even though it is temporary, this avidya potency of Mahamaya makes sure that that living entity gets that enjoyment, enjoys the desires he has desired for. Okay, so that is avidya potency. If what happens if there is no avidya potency, right? And it's like the example is given in 28th chapter. It explains in detail. So we'll go there, but just to give a glimpse of it, it's like an anesthesia. Let's say if a patient had gone through some surgery, okay, and he was put into anesthesia. So basically, if this avidya potency is not there, it's like a prematurely removing this anesthesia. Let's say the pain of the surgery sustains for about 8 hours, but you have given only a pain anesthesia for only 4 hours. Okay, so what will happen? So the avidya or that pain, living entity cannot sustain. The patient will seriously have a like maybe he may pass out or something like that. So similarly, if a living entity without avidya, if the Mahamaya cannot give that avidya to the living entity may suffer seriously. And he says that where is the independence? Now I was asked for independence, but I don't have the independence. So that question comes out, and that suffering will be there in this material world. That's why this avidya potency is very important. And the third one is vidya potency. If a living entity is conducive or getting favorable to move towards the Lord, then this vidya potency Mahamaya will guide him, or the material energy, or the prakriti of the material nature provides facilitates a favorable conditions for this living entity to move on towards the bhakti, or towards the supreme personality of Godhead. So that is vidya potency. So we discussed Mahamaya has three forms. The first form is Pradhan. Pradhan is the all the materials. It includes Vastu. Vastu means it includes all the materials that is required to create this material world. And Avidya potency, which is covered to make to illusion the living entity that he is really enjoying in the material world. And the vidya potency, which will, when the living entity gets favorable go back to Godhead, or to he's tired of uh, tired of this material world, then he gets favorable and he will be guided or facilitated to move towards the supreme personality of Godhead. So in this verse, why we are talking about avidya so much here is that in this verse it says that gunair vichitra srijitam sarupa prakritim praja vilokya mumhe sadya. So the jnana guhaya word is used. Jnana guhaya means the knowledge potency is covered. So that is avidya potency of the Mahamaya covers that knowledge. That's why we're talking about the avidya potency. Okay, it's like, as I said, it's like an effect of anesthesia. When the anesthesia is taken out, um, then the um, then the living entity or the patient cannot survive the pain. So that's why the avidya or jnana guhaya is required. Okay, so now Srila Prabhupada mentions that this material energy has the power to cover knowledge. Okay, but this covering cannot be applied to the supreme personality of Godhead. Very important point. Supreme personality of Godhead is the creator of this Mahamaya, and Mahamaya has a potency to cover the knowledge, but not the knowledge of the supreme personality of Godhead. So this is one good point we have to remember. It is applicable only to prajaha. Prajaha are the living entities, or those, sorry, or those who are born with material bodies, the conditioned souls. The different kinds of living entities vary according to modes of material nature. So basically, according to the modes of material nature, so Vichitra Srijatim, Gunair Vichitra, Gunai, three modes of material nature, they form or they combine, permutations and combinations happen and create different forms of the Srijatim created. So variegatedness of living entities, like Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport here, is like 8 million 400,000 species of life are being created with that combination of the material modes. As spirit souls, they're all transcendental to this material world. Even though the living entity is a spirit soul, in its pure form, or in the spirit soul form, they have they have nothing to do with this material world. They're transcendental as the supreme personality of Godhead, but still, because they're in this material world, they're covered, and they have they get different forms of material world here. Then why then do they exhibit themselves in different stages of life? The answer is given here. They are under the spell of three modes of material nature. So Gunaihi Srijatim. So Guna is like three modes of material. Because they were created by the material energy, their bodies are made of the material elements. Covered by material body, the spiritual identity is lost, and therefore the word Mumehe is used here, indicating that they have forgotten. So very nice verse. They have forgotten their identity. This forgetfulness of spiritual identity is present in jivas, or souls, who are conditioned, being subject to, covered by energy of material nature. Jnana Guhaya is another word. So as we said, Jnana Guhaya happens because of the avidya potency of the Mahamaya. Okay, Guha means covering. Because the knowledge of the minute conditioned soul is covered, they're exhibited in so many species of life. Yeah, so the living, so Prabhupada is quoting from Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 7, and also he quotes from the Vedas. Okay, he mentions that these material energies, these living entities are covered. The living entities are illusion to the material energy. That is one thing. And also in Vedas, it is mentioned that the living entities are covered in different modes, and they give the colors. There are three colors of these material modes. They are tricolored: red, white, and blue. Red representing the passion, mode of passion; white representing the mode of goodness, and blue representing the mode of ignorance. Okay, so these modes of material nature belong to the material energy, and therefore the living entities under these different modes of material nature have different kinds of material bodies. Because they are forgetful of their spiritual identities, they think the material bodies to be themselves. To the conditioned souls, me, so whenever a conditioned soul say I or me, so that means that is a material body. It doesn't mean that he's a spiritual body, or the um, spirit soul. So this is called moha, or bewilderment. So that is what Srila Prabhupada mentioning here. And Srila Prabhupada mentions another good point. It is a fact that there are two classes of men who are obedient to the laws of Supreme Lord, and who are non-obedient. So non-obedient are like rebellious. They want to desire themselves. They desire to enjoy themselves. They don't want to coexist with the Lord. So that's when they got an opportunity to go back to the material world. And that we talked about. Mahamaya creates this material world, and facilitates with the pradhan all the vastu required for this material, or the for the people, or the second class of people who wants to enjoy themselves. Okay. And so basically, this material world is not required. Okay, there is no need of material world, but still, Srila Prabhupada mentions here, example of the government. A government of a country doesn't have to have a jail, or doesn't have to have a police department in case, but still, it creates a police department, creates a room for the jails and the corrective department is there to ensure that in case if someone fails, then they'll be put into that corrective departments or corrective rooms to correct them, their behavior. Similarly, in reality, if every citizen of the country are good, there is no need of these jails or anything like that, or police department is not required. Similarly, if every living entity is good, or if every living entity is abiding to the laws of the Supreme Lord, then there is no need of material world. But still, because of that little independence that living entity gets, they want to enjoy. That's why Lord creates this material world. So this is what this verse gives us. And as we go, we can learn about a lot about universal form and other things again. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Madhupati Prabhu, over to you. Hare Krishna, Madhupati Prabhu. Can you hear me?
Haribol.
Yeah, Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Thank you very much, Hare Krishna Prabhu. We'd like to wish everybody a safe and Krishna conscious day ahead. Bhai Dooj today, the 5th day of the Diwali festival. And we'd like to offer our prayers to the Supreme Lord by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Sri Nrsingo, Jai Nrsingo, Jai Jai Nrsingo, Praladesha, Jaya Padma, Mukha Padma Bringam. Ugraveeram Mahavishtum Jwalantam Sarvato Mukham Nrsingham Bhisham Badram Mrityum Nami Ham. Nrsinga Bhagwana ki jai, Prahlad Maharaj ki jai.
Jai.
Let's offer our humble obeisances to all the assembled Vaishnavas. Vanchakalpatarubhescha kripa sindhu bhayeva patitanam pavanebhayo Vaishnaveभ्यो namaha. Vaishnavinda ki jai.
Jai.
ग्रंथ श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय,
Jai.
प्रभुपाद की जय,
Jai.
गौर प्रेमानंदे.
Hari 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 Bol. Thank you everybody. Hari Bol. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.